So I guess the first things first, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, could you give a brief explanation of who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Kevin M. Connolly, and I'm an actor. Do a lot of theater, a little bit of TV film, and the majority of my work has been voiceover over the last 20 something years. Um, I started doing anime way back in 2004 when Funimation was Funimation and not Crunchyroll. Some of the first shows I worked on were Case Closed. I played Master Sergeant Kane Fury in Full Metal Alchemist. Um, been on One Piece, a bunch of shows out there. I'm in LA now. I was Heathcliff in Sword Art Online. I'm Vladimir in League of Legends. I'm AWACS Band Dog in Ace Combat 7. Just today, as you caught me, was actually in studio recording. I'm also the narrator for Welcome to Demon School, which we're recording season 3 right now, and also have joined the cast as Mr. Hat, one of the new teachers this season. So I'm very excited about that. And then a sprinkling and smattering and of other anime jobs. And I do a lot of audiobooks for schools as well.
So I guess the general premise of the question that I sent you was
Yes.
I wanted to kind of understand how things have changed and shifted over the years with regards to voice acting in anime. So, but before I get to that, I guess
Yeah.
could you just explain how you got started in voice acting? Because I know you have
Sure.
like you have like a a traditional theater background
I
from what I
do.
understand.
Yeah, no, I did I've done a lot of training in school. I have a BA in theater from a college in San Antonio, and then I did my master's in acting at UCLA, and that's actually where I became interested in voiceover. This was 20 years ago, so it wasn't as prominent a subject. There was a reason why you heard the same guy doing Sunday, 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 in Chicago and New York and Seattle, because it was such a small little niche arena, if you will. In fact, there's one of the things I like to tell is that there's a movie with Robin Williams called Good Morning Vietnam. He actually plays a real character, Adrian Cronauer, and he actually wrote a book about voiceover. And at the time, this was the 80s, but still kind of relevant, I think. It was at the time, voiceover was the second most difficult form of entertainment to get into next to high fashion modeling. So it was a door closed unless you knew the magic password to get in. Now that's obviously changed in general because of the advancement of equipment that's become affordable. Obviously classes are available both in person and online now. How I got in, basically, a dear friend of mine from my graduate school days, who actually, you're probably too young, but there was a show called Pee-wee's Playhouse, and he was Ricardo, the world's strongest man on that. But he came in one day and said, I have to do a voiceover. Can we meet for lunch later? And I said, so what's this voiceover thing? And he said, well, I'm the Spanish spokesperson for Energizer. I was like, really? I said, that's interesting. And then he said, yeah, I just go to the studio, and the director's in Philadelphia and the producer's in Chicago, and I'm in LA. And then he told me how much he made. And I thought, I need to look into this. And so after that, after I graduated, I spent about 3 years because, again, information was just not really readily available. And I just bought every voiceover book I could. I'd moved back to Texas to work in children's theater, and I just was buying everything I could buy, every voiceover book I could find. I'd ask other actors, do you do voiceover? What kind? How do you approach doing a commercial? Or how do you approach doing animation compared to doing a commercial or a documentary? And then, honestly, by just a weird series of events, my dad's best friend's office was in the same office building with a voice actor who in Dallas who was willing to talk to me. So I drove up to visit family, and I spent 3 hours with it. His name was Bob Magruder. He's passed on now, but I think the last thing I knew he did was he was the narrator in what's the show with, I'm blanking on the show. It'll come back to me. But one of the anime shows, and he just happened to mention that he did a voiceover class in Houston, a one-day class with a partner of his. I said, great. So I moved to Dallas, start doing theater, and I reached out to him. But it was about 3 months later, and I say, hey, Bob, I'm in town. I would love to come to one of your workshops. And he said, Kevin, I'm doing one here in Dallas in 2 weeks. Send me $100, you're in. And I could not write that check fast enough, right? Now, in that interim, this is where I think the universe looked down at me saying, Kevin, you've studied for 3 years and you want to do this. Here is the gift of doing it. I had lunch with an old friend of mine from the children's theater in San Antonio I used to work with. And she said, so what are your plans here? And I said, well, I want to learn voiceover. She goes, I want to do voiceover too. I said, well, let's trade notes as this journey has begun for both of us. 2 days later, she calls me and says, Kevin, there's this company called Funimation. They do something with I think English and Japanese cartoons. I'm like, huh, okay. So me being just kind of the dumbass that I am, I called them up. I said, hey, what do you guys do? And they said, well, we do English dubs. And I said, okay, so do you go, is there a casting director that you go through specifically, or maybe a talent agency that I can start discussions with? How can I present myself as a possible auditioner? And they said, oh, just send us your demo and we'll put you on the audition list. I said, great, I'll do that. So I hung up, and my first thought is, I don't know what a demo is, but I've got a class in a week to find out. So I get to class, and where it was in the bottom floor of the building that he had his office and studio in, and it was a talent agency. And I kid you not, we're introducing ourselves like, when you're like the new student at school, like, hi, I'm Kevin, I've got a master's, but I don't know what I'm doing in voiceover. And 3 seats down, I hear this voice say, hi, I'm Mike McFarland. For the past 5 years, I've been a writer, director, producer, and actor at Funimation, and I'm looking to branch out. And I looked over and I was like, what? And I thought, this is the guy I need to talk to. And so we had we were reading copy all morning and, commercials and all this stuff. And then we have a lunch break. And so we all go our separate ways for lunch. And I come back a little early, and I'm reading a book, and I hear this voice say, so you're from San Antonio, huh? And I look up, and it's Mike. And I was like, yeah, no, I just moved here a couple months ago, and I'm doing theater, and I met Bob through my dad's friend. And I try to be nonchalant about it. I mean, I say this, I don't think I went this far, but I was like, so you're with, what was it, Fun Times or Funimate or something like that? And he said, yeah, Funimation. I said, what's interesting? I just called, and they said that I should, if I wanted to be considered, I have to get a demo made and have it, to be put on the audition list. And I'm hoping to learn more about demos here. But maybe I could pick your brain if you're comfortable with that. Maybe I could, buy you lunch or something, and just, again, trying to learn more, because that's a process we weren't covering, because dubbing at the time was not, I mean, voiceover was a niche, but dubbing was the micro niche, right? And he kind of rolled his eyes when I said the audition list. And I said, what's with the eye rolling? He said, the audition list is a 2-year wait. I thought, well, I've got 2 years to figure out how to make a great demo. And he said, no. I mean, you're trained. I like what you're doing. You got good control of your voice. Give me your contact info and I'll bring you in for a little something. And 2 weeks later, I was in my first dubbing session, freaked out of my mind, kept saying, don't pay me, I'm terrible at this. But he started my journey. I think, again, the universe just lined things up for me. So it really was being prepared in the right place at the right time. That's something I tell all my students. You got to be ready, because you never know when those doors are going to open to you. So, but you won't be able to recreate what I did at all, ever. That's the short. That's my story.
That kind of perfectly segues into one of the questions I wanted to ask was,
yeah,
how has auditioning for a role changed over the years?
Oh, well, hugely. And this is across the board for voiceover. When I was at Funimation, auditions were Friday nights. If there was a new show, you would get an email saying, do you want to audition for this show? Or we have those auditions, so-and-so wants to bring you in. And you'd get your time, and then you drive down to the studio, and they'd have these 3-ring binders of the main characters, and you thumb through, and you look for the character that you think you might be good for, and you pick 1 or 2, and then you read for it. And then the director will either say, okay, read this way, or I thought about you for this other character, I want you for this. Like, just thinking back, I never auditioned for Fury and Full Metal Alchemist. I auditioned for Scar and a scientist. But what I did for the scientist is what Mike and Colleen liked for Fury. And so that's just kind of how I got pulled into that. So you never know. But now, obviously, I mean, you can't see it, but I built a sound booth. I mean, I've been auditioning at home almost 10 years now. We don't go to the studio. We don't go, or especially like here in LA, what it used to be is that every voiceover talent agency would have a booth director. So you would drive to your agent, and they would get you in the booth, and there'd be a booth director, and they do a couple of takes for the audition, and they would send it in for you. Now it's just an email, and it doesn't matter what time or day, and I pop in the booth and record it, do a little bit of editing, and send it on its way. And that has segue also into sending work. A lot of my, especially with like audiobooks now, audiobooks, we're not going to Penguin Random House to record in a studio. I'm recording audiobooks in my booth and self-direction, doing cleanup, and then I just either load it up to an FPT site or email it away, and it's gone. I mean, I think 90% of my work now, take into consideration obviously the pandemic situation, but 95% of my work I do right here in my bedroom in my booth, and that's probably the biggest changes. I don't have to go anywhere. I mean, and now, I mean, I work internationally. I mean, I've done video games for companies in China. If you ever go to the Natural Museum in Thailand, you'll hear me in the gift shop telling you thank you, come again, in English. And so it's really changed in that, especially, I mean, it's the internet and technology and being able to do everything at home now. That's really one of the biggest changes.
Another perfect segue. So
I try my best. It's a special skill.
the next thing is just how technology has changed and how that's affected how you work, besides working from home and everything.
Right. Well, it has added a job to voice actors. We had to learn how to be engineers. We had to learn how to edit audio. Again, when we go in and do our auditions, we go in, make our mistakes, and we laugh or cough or something, and then we leave, and then somebody else would handle that. Well, now that particular aspect, that's been a new hat that we've had to take on, and I had to learn. And I was kind of lucky because I was working with I've been working with this audiobook company for about 10 years now, learning first being a narrator, learning how to clean up my own audio, then turned into a proofer, and now I'm a production manager and learning how to edit and master. But those skills really have to be available to all professional voice actors and aspiring voice actors. You have to have two different jobs, and you have to really know your equipment. And of course, that has also brought out a number of different available, what are called DAWs, digital audio workstations. I mean, the industry standard is Pro Tools. Every studio you'll find Pro Tools, but it's also super expensive, and then you have Adobe Audition, you have Audacity, GarageBand, Reaper, so you kind of pick your DAW of choice, and you either have to get training on it, or in my case, I just watched a ton of YouTube and just said, what does this button do? What does this button do? How can I use this to make me sound better? Which it led into an interesting thing. So just a quick sideway if I can. An experience where I did my first audiobook for ACX, which is the Amazon audiobook production arm, where you can audition to narrate audiobooks. But when you audition and book a job through them, you're not just the narrator, you are the producer of the final product for sale. So it has to be cleaned and mastered. Either you hire somebody if you want to pay them, or you do it all yourself. So I booked a job on there, and I thought, well, I've got to master this thing. I don't know what I'm doing. And I remember I made a post on Craigslist saying, is there anybody who can show me the basics of mastering to these standards? ACX has a page. It tells you exactly, what levels they want everything at. I thought, great. And I hate to say it, but at the time, some of the responses I got were like, no, we shouldn't have to teach you. You need to hire us, engineers, because more and more people were doing stuff at home, so there wasn't much work coming into studios, and but I did find a guy who I think he saw the writing on the wall, where he actually offers a service. So for this particular specific case, he offers the ACX mastering. So for $200, you send in your raw audio, your room tone, the DAW you're working on, and then he does all the presets and mastering so that it matches specifically to the mastering requirements of ACX. So for me, it was 2 button clicks, and then I suddenly sounded amazing, which isn't easy. And I was able to, to produce broadcast quality work that is professional enough to be sold on iTunes and all that stuff. So that aspect has really become important for a lot of actors, is you have to either learn how to be an engineer or find your resources to help you do it, because you're working with clients from home. So you have to be sending in that final product, the ready to broadcast product, rather than just saying, here's my audio. I mean, some companies will say, just send us what you have. We have a team, but I like to go above and beyond, to be remembered. And so that aspect has just become part of the job, so that's my long answer for that. Sorry, you get me babbling, I won't shut up.
No problem. More details always appreciated.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, the next question I have is like with the increasing popularity of voice acting just as a whole, like I imagine the level of competition per role has gone up dramatically.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because there's a couple of aspects. Yes, the interest in voiceover from professional actors who now realize they can do it at home, to you have a lot of what are called finding work. Where do you find a lot of, especially non-union work? You're going to find it online. It's just a click. It's a website away. But what that adds in is that not only is there more competition, you have to think globally now. Okay, you're not just like if I go to an audition here in LA, maybe I'm up against 500 people, right? Suddenly go statewide, maybe that's about 2,500 people. Nationwide, probably about 5,000 people if a casting director is willing to listen to all that. But when you're talking online, you are competing for roles with people around the world. Which I had to factor in time zones. I may get an audition at 2 in the morning from a pay-for-play site that says they want 30 auditions. I said, great, open it up. Well, it was posted at 2 a.m., but that was whatever time it is in London, and they've got all the auditions already. So I won't even bother auditioning. So the competition has grown immensely, and what I've seen out of that, because I do some casting now for this audiobook company, and I'm always encouraging people who want to explore this industry and want to be part of this world, great, but you have to educate yourself. Because your audition is your one shot, right? That if I was doing a theater or TV film, the headshot is your starting point. It's all about the look. There's a reason the resume is on the back. If you don't got the look, they're not even going to bother with you, right? If you can't present yourself as sounding as you would in a professional product, you're not going to get very far. I had an undergrad teacher who once told me a couple of little nuggets of wisdom is ask yourself, why should someone pay you as an artist? What do you offer? And for example, I was casting a book recently, and I think what happens is there's a lot of people out there now who are attracted by the world of voiceover, and may have been told the old adage of like, you've got a wonderful voice, you should be doing voiceover, but then they don't follow up with, well, what kind of voiceover? Because you've got audiobooks, you got movie trailers, you got animation, you got video games, you got e-learning, you've got political things, you've got medical things, which area do you dive into? And if you're not prepared for that, if you don't have training in how to handle what kind of equipment you should be using, what's your recording space, that's going to knock you right out of any consideration. I mean, I've gotten auditions where I hear the click of record, I hear this empty room sound and maybe the clink of a chair at a table, and then they start talking into their iPhone. That's not someone I'm going to cast, so you really have to educate yourself in all aspects if you want to present yourself in this very competitive world, because quite frankly, you're going up against people like me, who I built my own sound booth. I'm not in a closet. I built a sound booth. I've invested in equipment. I still take classes, voiceover classes and acting classes, to keep my chops up, to make sure that or learn new ideas on how to approach material. Because I think another thing a lot of people fall into is like, well, it's just talking into a microphone. And I think once they realize that it's not, they're going to find themselves in trouble. And my encouragement is, if you want, I don't know how I got into this segue that, I apologize again. But again, with competition, you have to make sure that you're stepping up to the plate with the information that you're educating yourself to. Also, that this is a business. Yes, it's a great creative outlet, but this is a business. I created an LLC. I have a tax person to help me write off my classes, the equipment I buy, my mileage if I do go to a studio like today. There's so many aspects you have to educate yourself on, or find people to teach you. And that will bring you to the upper level of the competition, again, that you are dealing with worldwide. Does that all make sense, I think?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The next question I have is, how has, or maybe it hasn't, maybe this is something that stayed relatively similar, is the scripts that you receive. I was wondering if, like, in terms of if there have been formatting changes, or obviously I imagine the delivery method has changed to digital, but I'm just wondering if the scripts have changed at all.
Well, if
Over the years.
not really, no. I mean, it's a script is a script, really. Like with commercials or audiobooks or anything like that, they just send me the book, and I just read off of that. With like scripts, if we're going to talk specifically anime, we aren't always sent those in advance. If there's certain level of secrecy or they don't want anything out. So like specifically with dubbing, it's set up to where I've got a Zoom call where I can see the anime footage. Then there's a Google Teams where they've got the script up for me. And that way, that also too, one of the things like today, we had to do it quite a bit, is a lot of rewriting can happen because there may just be too many words or there are just too few words. Every writer tries to write to the actor that may be in a part, but some of us just naturally speak faster or slower, and it just doesn't work. And so the director who usually rewrites that has to have quick access to that. So like today, I was working with Jalen Castle, and he was having to rewrite a couple things, and I just watched the script on his screen on the laptop, because he's actually directing remotely. I was in studio with the engineer, but he's directing from home. And I just watched the script change, but script wise like that, you get a little tricky, especially with video games too. I haven't done a lot of video games, so I can't speak for a lot of the major studios, but my understanding is, there's a lot of secrecy, obviously. And so you don't often have advance notice. Like I'd go in today and I'd see the lines for the first time, but commercials and audiobooks, it's just a Word document or a text or a PDF, and I'm golden, that kind of thing.
Speaking of anime, I think broadcast or simuldubbing, I think started in like around 2013, 2014-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering if that had any impact on the way voice actors work. And
absolutely. And that's really interesting you bring that up, because I hadn't experienced that before, to be honest with you, because I moved away. I stopped working for Funimation in 2008 because I'd gone back home to teach. And then I moved out to LA in 2009. And so I think they were kind of the pioneers of doing the simuldubs. And so the shows I've worked on where I'd get, they'd say, okay, we've got 3 episodes to work on because we're not under those time constraints. And Welcome to Demon School specifically has been like that for the last 2 seasons, until I realized today, this is my 3rd week going in and we're only recording 1 episode at a time. And I didn't make the connection at first. So I just asked the director, said, hey, what, usually we do like 2 or 3 episodes. What's going on? I mean, are the scripts not ready? And says, no, this is being shown on Crunchyroll. So it's a simuldub. I'm like, oh. And so, I mean, I can't speak for anyone else. I've heard things, it speeds things up. And so sometimes I think there's not a question, but a concern of quality of, in maybe any area of the writing, of the directing, of how fast things have got to come out. Acting wise, I love being able to go to the studio once a week. That's really nice. I wouldn't mind seeing if I can book another show like that, to come out here. But it definitely has, I think, affected production schedule. And I can't speak for anyone specifically, but just kind of the vibe I'm getting is that in some areas of production, it really makes things more challenging, and it can be frustrating. When especially I'm going to assume there's probably a lot more rewriting being done, which of course slows the recording session down, because a writer may not have as much time to fine tune before they submit a script. Where they might have had maybe a week or a couple, maybe even a couple of weeks. I don't know the current writing process for, I haven't written since One Piece 10, 15, 20 years ago. But, when you're kind of rushed doing the adaptation into making sure that does the dialogue make sense? Does it fit? We're kind of speeding through that. So I don't know if it's a positive overall for everybody. As an actor, and just as an actor, I don't mind going in once a week. I just happened to mention to Jalen, I get to hang out with the really cool kids. But so I think it depends on what part of production you ask. And I think that there may be a feeling of like, we wish we could spend a little bit more time, but it's what the fans want. It's, they want everything as fast as possible. And You know, we're trying to bring out the best quality product in a new process the best we can. And now I'm a part of it. So we'll see. Ask me in 6 months and we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
You mentioned it, so I guess we'll just ask.
Sure.
You have a few ADR credits. So I was just wondering,
Yeah.
if you could explain how those came about, because it doesn't seem like you've done it a whole lot, but you do have a few.
How do you mean?
Like, I think you were you worked at just according to the script, so maybe this is
Sure.
not completely accurate, but like you had a credit as like in ADR script, or
Oh, the writing. Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, I need a lot more training in writing. So actually, one of the jobs I had that they generously gave me is I did script prep at Funimation. Well, Funimation at the time, Crunchyroll now, where I would go through in the script so that the writers could focus just on adapting the translation. I would go through and put in all the time codes and the character names and when the flaps would start, and notes that a crowd cheering from this time code to this time code. So I would do all that, and then I asked if I could take a crack at writing, and I definitely need I would need a writing course. I think it's very for me it was challenging. Again, I can only speak for me, myself, and I think I overthink a lot, so I would struggle. Like they would tell me, like I think I wrote a couple episodes of One Piece, and then I did one Cashern, I think it was, and that was the one I talked to the head writer, and he said, "Yeah, you kind of stuck really close to the translation." I said, "Well, yeah, I wasn't sure where to go, And now every studio is different too. I think at least what I recall. So again, if this is current, I don't know. I have not worked as a writer at Funimation in 20 years, but at the time, they really were like, as long as the through line of the story of the episode was there, they said rewrite it, make the scenes your own. Whereas, like at Bang Zoom, where the template is just a little different because we actually have the adaptation text, but then there's an extra column that maybe Crunchyroll does this now, I don't know, where they have the translation. And so you can kind of see where the writer was coming out of to make adjustments with. And I think they try to stick much more closely to the translation. So it depends on the studio. It depends on the original company that produced the anime. Like specifically, I was in a show called Crayon Shin-Chan, where the writing was all over the place. And what I understood was that the Japanese producer said, "Do whatever you want to the show." Like, I mean, so sometimes in a script you may have a line of dialogue, and then there may be what's called an alt underneath, where just a little variation, maybe they think it might fit the flaps better, give it a shot. On Shin-Chan, we would have 15 alt lines with different jokes to try out. Like I'd go from, "Oh, my favorite, honey roasted sea bass," or, "Oh, I've always loved tuna gravy toast," or something like that. So there's a lot of factors, I think, in deciding and how that writing is approached. I'd love to give it a shot again, but I definitely feel that it's funny because I've done so many scripts as an actor. I mean, we're talking stage and TV, film, but then when I try to sit down and write, I'm like, Jane says hello, Michael says hey, and I don't know where I'm going with it. So I wish I was a better writer, and hopefully maybe one day I will be, but there's a reason why there's only very, very few ADR script writing credits right now.
You mentioned at the beginning
Yeah.
that you have the traditional theater background. I'm just wondering, like, how beneficial do you think having that background is, specifically when it comes to transitioning to voice acting?
For me, okay, so there's a lot of different thought on this. I've never understood when people just say, "I'm just a voice actor." In my opinion, if you're an actor and if you're bringing a character to three-dimensional life, you're an actor. Okay, acting is acting is acting, and I'm a firm believer that if you want to, it's because again, and this comes down to competition as well. you have to have training. You have to understand you're going up against people who have training. I've had 7 years of higher education. I've studied Stanislavski, Strasberg, read some, I have a technique, an approach, an understanding of how to approach scripts. So if you're out there saying, I want to do voiceover, I want to be an actor, well, then, you need to find that technique that works for you. I think it's an absolute necessity. Going back to what I just said, acting is acting is acting. What changes is the stage you're performing on, in my opinion. So going from a theater stage, there are certain techniques I have to approach. The audience is seeing my entire body. I need to communicate with that. I need to make sure I'm vocalizing to the back row, compared to where a camera stage, where the eye of the audience is right here. So I know I can just make a little look and it just reads, hugely, compared to voiceover. They can't see my body. So I have to find the techniques to apply to, but it's the same process at its core. Does that make sense? And so, I'm not a fan. I mean, I'm an actor who happens to do voiceover work. I don't like to call myself a voice actor. I mean, voiceover artist, I'll go with that a little bit, but I'm an actor. I'm doing a script. And nothing changes until I find out how it's being perceived, whether it's visually or orally. So that's how I look at it. But to your question, absolutely. If you if you want to compete in this business, you have to be a great actor. You have to be a great actor to be considered. You have to be professional. You have to know what it means to be professional. And having professional materials to present yourself, not only to studios or casting directors, but if you want to get agent representation, you need to have, you need to be to say, look, this is my education, this is my experience. Even if it's a one line of experience, but if you say, yeah, you know what, I've been studying Meisner for the last, I take classes in Meisner or something. You need to have a technique, an approach, because you have to be able to work quickly and make decisions quickly. Like especially with some of the AAA games, you will not see a script. You may know the name of the character, but you will have to go in to a studio and instantaneously start asking questions in your head about bringing this character to life in the next 2 minutes. Okay. And if your thought of voiceover is, well, I can do 1,000 voices, that's not going to save you. When you go into that booth saying, okay, this is this character, like if you ever look at if you look at an audition for a video game character, and I show one of these in my panel, I have one that's 5 sentences long. Okay. Describing of the character for an audition. Only 1 line is about what vocal quality they want. Everything else is about the emotional history and journey of that character. And that's the information you need to learn how to interpret and bring to life. And that really can only come down to, again, having an acting technique and understanding, and also working with how to work with directors. There's been more than one time where I've read a line thinking, oh, that's awful, that's wrong, that's the wrong interpretation, not the right inflection, I wasn't connected. And the director may say, okay, yeah, that was great, let's move on. And you can't just sit there and say, oh, excuse me, no, I need to do the line again. It's like, you have to be able to work with multiple people. So being in theater is fantastic for that. Also improv, you have to learn how to improvise and to really kind of keep your wheels turning and your creativity going. So if you're not taking theater, if you're thinking, well, I can do 1,000 voices, when if you're doing a union job, they only pay you for 4. So why worry about the other 996 voices that you're not going to get paid for? So invest in that time and working on an acting craft. I mean, there's tons of techniques. Find what works for you, and that will give you that extra step up to start your journey as being a professional voiceover artist.
Okay, this will be my final question, and that was the final perfect segue.
Okay.
You answered it. I think you touched on a lot of it, but maybe there's one thing specifically that you would like to point out is
sure.
Mandatory question that you have to ask to every person that's in voice acting. If there's one thing that you could tell aspiring voice actors what should they do in order to put themselves in the best position to succeed? Whether that's like a class,
put yourself in, to put yourself in that mindset, I think goes back to what I said earlier. That's a great question. I really like that a lot. So, well, okay, so there's 2 parts to it. And this comes from my undergrad teacher. There's 2 things that he told me. He said, what is it that you offer that someone should pay you for as an artist? And you have to think about that in the aspects of, I'm a trained professional. I understand home recording equipment. I understand character creation. I understand improvisation. Okay. And all that's going to come from your training and your experience and putting the time and effort into that. And the other element of that is, and it may seem a little harsh, but it's a reality. And this is for any acting area. I mean, because acting is acting. That he told me, ask yourself this: your competition is working harder than you. What are you going to do about it? They're taking the extra class. They're saving up the $1,000 for professional demo because they know that's the one chance they have. They're taking that accent class. They're taking singing lessons to learn more about their voice. So if you keep those two phrases in mind and what layers underneath that to answer those questions, and being committed to being an amazing storyteller, because there's a lot of kids, I think, who are young aspiring actors who their goal is, I want to be famous. I want to get invited to cons and sign autographs. Okay. But you have to ask yourself, why do people do that? Because they do great performances. So you have to figure out, more importantly, and the only importance to me is, how do you as an artist give a great performance to the writer, to the director, to the creator of whatever product you're working on? Yeah, that's it. Yeah.